Good Wednesday afternoon, and thanks for joining us on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Lauren Lemanchek. If you're heading out at all today, make sure you bundle up. We've got some bitter cold temperatures moving in with some snow. And by the end of it all, temperatures will be well below zero tomorrow morning. We'll check in with the weather team for a full look at the forecast in just a bit. New this afternoon, KARE Minnesota responding to a new ICE operation in the Twin Cities targeting the Somali community.
We are reminding our community that they have rights. We anticipate, or we have believed that Somali Americans in Minnesota particularly, over 90% are pathways to citizenship, and most of them are citizens of the United States. I want people to know that the Somali American community is an extremely resilient community. We went through a lot of challenges. We have been targeted many times.
The Minnesota Council on American Islamic Relations is also condemning the hateful rhetoric and threats directed at Minnesota's Somalis coming from President Trump. Homeland Security has not confirmed any ICE operations yet, but they said targets of those raids are based on immigration status, not ethnicity. But President Trump yesterday shared this message to the Somali people.
I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country.
We have crews on the ground across the Twin Cities watching for any federal operations and hearing from the Somali community. Stick with KARE 11 Plus for any updates on the ICE operations happening here. New this afternoon, another face could enter the Minnesota's governor's race. Mike Lindell. He filed the paperwork just today to challenge Governor Tim Walz and several other Republicans running to be the leader of Minnesota. Prominent GOP candidates for governor include Minnesota House Speaker Lisa Demuth, 2022 nominee Scott Jensen, State Rep Kristen Robbins, businessman Kendall Qualls, and attorney Chris Madel. Well, today there's another major decision from Washington that could impact nearly 500,000 Minnesotans. The Trump administration says it plans to withhold SNAP funding from several Democratic-led states, including Minnesota, if they refuse to turn over personal data on SNAP recipients. Raya Katene has the story.
When the federal government recently shut down and the food assistance program SNAP was halted,
the need is big.
Food shelves like this one saw brand new faces.
More people than we'd ever served in a day before.
Julia McCarthy is the program's director at Keystone Community Services based in St. Paul. The food center serves about 180 families every day, 5 days a week. And McCarthy says that need will only grow if SNAP funding gets cut.
There's no way that food shelf organizations can fill the gap that would be created if SNAP went away.
But the White House says it will cut funding for the program as soon as next week for states that do not turn over the personal information, including names, home addresses, and immigration status of SNAP recipients.
21 states, including California, New York, and Minnesota, the blue states, continue to say no. So as of next week, we have begun and will begin to stop moving federal funds into those states until they comply.
Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins says the federal government is asking for the data in an effort to root out fraud in the program, which Republican Minnesota State Representative Nolan West says is necessary.
These people are on public assistance, and the people funding the taxpayers, and as well as the federal government who foots the bill when it comes to SNAP, should know where the money's going.
But Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, alongside 21 other states, recently sued the Trump administration, saying the USDA's request violates the Constitution and called it a mass surveillance agenda. Meanwhile,
the whole Twin Cities kind of comes through our doors.
McCarthy says caught in the middle of all of this are Twin Cities families who simply need a helping hand.
There's no one that comes in this door that doesn't really need our help.
A federal judge did recently block the federal government from withholding funding from states that did not comply with this data request. So we're watching to see what happens next. The state says about 440,000 Minnesotans receive SNAP benefits every month. Another threat from the White House to tell you about this afternoon. The Trump administration says it will withhold $30 million in federal transportation funding until Minnesota complies with federal requirements for foreign truck drivers. Residents of other countries who are in the U.S. legally can be issued a commercial driver's license as long as states follow federal rules. But an audit showed Minnesota broke the rules on 1 out of every 3 of those CDLs. Violations included the state not verifying a driver's legal status or issuing a license that expires years after the driver's work visa has expired.
We depend on those credentials to be right. We want to make sure people behind the trucks are who they say they are. And so I believe the state's going to correct it.
The Transportation Department is giving Minnesota 30 days to fix those issues. This afternoon, another twist in the Derek Chauvin case. He's asking for a new state trial. He claims his convictions were tainted due to misconduct by the prosecution and false testimony from expert witnesses. The 71-page filing asks for his 3 convictions to be vacated, saying his rights were, quote, destroyed. It also says 5 years have passed since George Floyd's death and the riots that followed, so the court can finally look at the evidence, quote, through a clear lens. New today, President Trump is backing away from a second U.S. strike on an alleged drug boat that reportedly killed survivors of the initial attack on the boat. Right now, Congress is calling for more investigations on the strike, saying they may be illegal in targeting survivors. There's been no proof offered that there were drugs on that boat. This week, Admiral Frank Bradley, who allegedly ordered the second strike on the boat, is expected to speak to Congress. Meanwhile, the president says the strikes will continue.
Somebody asked me a question about the second strike. I didn't know about the second strike. I didn't know anything about people. I wasn't involved in it. I knew they took out a boat. I can say this, I want those boats taken out. And if we have to, we'll attack on land also, just like we attack on sea.
New today, several hours of talks between Russian President Putin and the U.S. envoy produced no breakthrough in the Russia-Ukraine peace deal. Ukraine and European allies are now accusing Russia of showing no interest in reaching the peace deal, while Russia accused the Europeans of sabotaging the negotiation. NBC's Keir Simmons has the latest from Moscow.
Well, there are 5 hours of talks. The Trump team leaving Moscow in the middle of the night after a short trip to the U.S. Embassy behind me there, and according to the Russians, a phone call home to President Trump. President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner and his envoy Steve Witkoff made progress according to the Russians, but so far there is no deal. The Kremlin today insisting that President Putin did not simply reject the proposal from the Americans, that they are prepared to continue to negotiate, to talk as often as needed, they say, but on the other hand, they are saying that there were elements of the proposals that were simply unacceptable to the Kremlin. That really has been the uncompromising message from President Putin the days up to these talks. The question now is what more can be done to bridge what is clearly a huge divide between the Ukrainian and some European countries' position and the Russians. Keir Simmons, NBC News, Moscow.
New figures this afternoon show the U.S. labor market hit the brakes in November. Payroll processing firm ADP says private companies cut around 32,000 workers. November hiring was weak in manufacturing, construction, information, professional, and business services. That's according to ADP. And small businesses experienced the highest dip, slashing around 120,000 employees in November. This is in contrast to October reports that showed a gain of 47,000 jobs. With so many Minnesotans shopping for the holidays, many people are turning to lenders like PayPal and Klarna that let you buy now and pay later. But is that the best idea? Attorney General Keith Ellison is looking into whether those companies are breaking the law. Here's Sammy Selena.
In the middle of a busy holiday season, Attorney General Keith Ellison is looking into how buy now, pay later companies operate and whether or not they are taking advantage of consumers and following Minnesota laws.
We do know that there are problems and have been problems associated with this kind of a transaction.
He's joining a coalition of 7 attorney generals inquiring about pricing and consumer contracts of 6 companies, including Afterpay, a firm, and Minnesota-based Sezzle. These businesses partner with merchants to offer a way for consumers to break up their payments, usually in 4 installments.
So what are some of the pitfalls consumers can fall into?
A lot of people who take out these little mini loans, they don't realize that they may say, okay, there's no interest, no fees, but there are late fees. They also, if you don't pay on time, they may report you to credit reporting bureaus, and it may negatively affect your credit score.
Kevin Brassler is the executive editor at Consumers Checkbook.
The big problem is these companies aren't doing a good job, clearly aren't doing a good job of disclosing the fees, the late fees, what happens if you don't pay us back on time, and so on. And a lot of people who are taking out these loans get caught in this debt trap.
The Biden administration attempted to add more regulations to the industry, saying buy now, pay later companies needed to abide by some of the same rules as credit card companies. Under the Trump administration, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau said it would no longer prioritize enforcement, saying the Bureau will instead keep its enforcement and supervision resources focused on pressing threats to consumers.
We want to make sure that the transaction is honest, above board, and transparent.
Minnesota-based Sezzle said in a statement that it, quote, shares the goal of clear, consistent standards that protect consumers and that it will have a response on their website in the next few days to Ellison's inquiry. Stick with us. We have more news and weather coming up after the break.